They taught my hands to be gentle, to lift the brush 100 times, to oil the ends until copper waves glowed under gaslight. For 19 years, I served beauty that never served me back. New Orleans, 1853. I stood behind Mistress Evangeline's chair with the silver scissors I only touched for split ends. Her hair spilled over the silk robe like a river catching fire, rich, proud, untouchable. I knew the life inside the mirror better than the life beyond it. Velvet walls, mahogany drawers, perfume bottles nested like pearls. And me, a shadow trained to keep the light steady. Tonight the mirror blinked, her slap still burned. Blood tasted like pennies. She smiled at her reflection the way tyrants smile at maps. "Finish," she said, "and remember your place." I pressed cold steel near the soft skin behind her ear and watched her throat move when she swallowed. The room held its breath with me. The lamps, the ribbons, the silver combs. I had cut her hair 1,000 nights. Tonight I would cut the only chain I could reach. Before we go further, subscribe and comment your state below. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me, if the only weapon you held was a pair of scissors, what would you do? Because here is the question that kept me awake for 19 years. When beauty becomes a weapon, who gets to hold it? I was born in the servants' quarters behind the Marshon mansion, where the night smelled like starch and wood smoke, and the mornings began with whispers. Quiet now. Quiet, as if silence were a prayer that kept us alive. They made my name soft. Lily, a flower trained to bloom where another woman's shadow fell. The first thing I learned was not to drop things. The second was to see every want before it was spoken. The third was to make her bright. Brush strokes to count. Pins to place where the weight would hold. Oil for the ends. Perfume for the nape. A ribbon when the city demanded a ribbon. I polished a person who called me property. I fed a mirror that swallowed me whole. Mistress Evangeline loved 3 things in this order: her hair, her face, and people knowing it. Her hair was New Orleans talk, untouched by scissors since childhood. Copper in lamplight, a sheet she could drape across her vanity like a trophy rug. I measured seasons by how it fell. Looser in summer humidity, electric in winter dryness. She would say, "Careful, Lily. These locks cost more than your life." She'd laugh as if the arithmetic were funny. They told me house service was mercy. Soft shoes, not bare feet in mud. Sugar on pastries, not sugar in the boiling houses. But mercy with a key is still a cell. Gas lamps hissed. The boulevard rolled carriages past music you could only touch with your ears. In the mirror beside her face, I watched myself become useful the way silver becomes useful. Shine, reflect, disappear. Sometimes she asked me to stand beside her while visitors came. The both of us framed in guilt. "See?" she'd tell them with hummingbird delight. "How nature arranges order. How refinement declares itself. I learned to breathe without moving my chest. I learned to smile like furniture. I also learned where every soft thing on a human body lies. The skin behind the jaw, the thin vein at the temple, the tender flesh where the ear meets the neck. A lady's maid knows tenderness because she tends it. What a world that trains your hands to love what hates you. I did not hate her at first. Hate is hot. Slavery is a long winter, but there are winters where ice forms under paint, and you don't know the house is cracking until a quiet room creaks at night and will not stop. Dainty 3 New Orleans. One house of mirrors. One girl trained to be gentle. If your hands created a beauty you could never own, would you still serve? She weaponized reflection. Every night 2 faces in the same frame told one story. Hers was art. Mine was instrument. She narrated the difference like scripture. Your texture, she'd say, meaning my hair, announces labor. Mine announces leisure. Your skin absorbs light. Mine returns it. She'd tilt to catch the lamp and make glow a personality trait. A woman must be seen, she'd purr. And a servant must learn to vanish. She pretended it was teaching. It was erasure with a satin bow. I remember one afternoon when thunder made lace of the sky. She called me to the parlor to pour tea for women whose voices could slice sugar. I stood, tray steady, while they admired how my presence made her paleness brighter. Contrast is everything, one said. They examined me like swatches, then ordered poison in teaspoons, gossip, while I refilled their cups. You want me to say I broke that day? No. I filed it. Cruelty is a painter of small strokes. the lashes that never leave marks, the threats wrapped in advice. "We must consider your future, Lily," she'd say, and the word bent like a branch under snow. "Pretty girls grow inconvenient. Perhaps we'll find you a husband in the quarters." She spoke of my life like wardrobe. Change the dress, change the role, keep the mannequin. But the mirror taught me a different arithmetic. I could count what I knew about her. How her scalp flushed with wine. How anger brightened the left cheek first. How sorrow made the right corner of her mouth tug down as if God had tied a string to it. I knew her posture better than my own prayers. I knew where her pride lived. Every empire has a temple. Hers was her hair. Night after night I brushed an idol and learned its weaknesses. Where the strands snarled and needed patience. Where the weight pulled and a pin must sit. Where an incautious hand could nick the skin and draw a peony of red. I never nicked. I was perfect. I made myself perfect because it was the only safe thing to be. And because somewhere in that perfection, my anger found an alibi. One mirror. Two reflections. Only one considered human. Do mirrors reflect truth or only power? At 18, the world began to look back at me. Not the world with power. The world with eyes. I didn't invite it. Attention arrives like a draft under a door. You feel it before you name it. A merchant's son forgot his sentence when I passed. A lawyer, older, damp, always damp, told me I walked like a stage curtain. I learned to carry my shoulders as if they were guilty. She noticed. Predators notice other predators. "We must tuck you away," she said one morning, voice wrapped in lace. "Men are sloppy with appetite, and it would be unseemly if their gaze toured my house and stopped where it didn't belong. Where it didn't belong was me." She tightened my dresses. She bound my chest until breath made little boat noises in my throat. She changed my tasks. Fewer parlor entrances, more scullery errands that stained fingers and hid wrists. She called it protection. It was containment. Her possessiveness sharpened into routine inspections. "Posture," she'd command. "Cleanliness." She circled me, taking inventory like a woman counting silver after a party. Her gaze was a gloved hand. "Turn," I turned. "Arms," I raised them. "Smile." I arranged my face the way she liked her flowers, symmetrical, scentful, silent. I would have survived only this. We survived much worse than inspection. But then the cousin arrived from Natchez with a laugh too loud for quiet rooms. Marcel. He was made of cotton money and river mud, and some fast-burning charm that embarrasses itself by noon. At dinner the first night he said grace like a man bargaining, then found me with his eyes and forgot his spoon. "Cousin," he said to her, "your maid moves like a page turning." I felt the air change the way animals feel weather. She smiled at him and hemorrhaged at me. "Lily is adequate," she said, each syllable a pin. "Refinement requires breeding." That night she had me unbind her hair twice, down, up, down again, because the first bun did not say triumph loudly enough. When she finally slept, the mirror still looked hungry. One girl's beauty, another woman's terror. Terror creates cruelty. If your looks made you a target, would you hide them? Cousin Marcel brought city noise into the house. He stomped mud into metaphors. He liked words that sounded like coins. He smelled faintly of tobacco and a man pleased by his own shadow. He flirted with tablecloths. I learned his footsteps, those middle-of-the-hall hesitations that tell you a person wants to be found. He complimented everything as if compliments were currency he could mint. The roast, too salty. The piano, out of tune. The breeze from the wrong direction. Yet when his gaze grazed me, it changed. Quieter, like a ship sliding into fog. Not longing, not respect. Attention with reverence in it. I did not seek it. He carried it like a candle. The room noticed. She noticed most. Her answers to him grew sharp, then syrupy, then sharp again. The way a woman speaks when she is dancing in a dress too tight. She wore her green silk that makes the city think of absinthe and envy. She requested a hairstyle I call the coronet. The hair laid like a laurel, a winner crowning herself before the race. I performed artistry. Pins vanished like secrets. The shape lifted, balanced. When I finished, she smiled at the woman in the mirror, like a general approving a map. Downstairs, candles made a republic of shadows. I poured wine. He watched me pour, the steady wrist, the angle that prevents splashing. He said it aloud. "Grace." She shattered her smile without moving her mouth. After the guests left, after the compliments curdled into silence, she sent everyone away and kept me. The door closed. The room had that post-party smell of flowers and ash. "How dare you," she said, not loudly. "Sharp things are quieter. How dare you make yourself visible?" "I performed my duties," I said, heart behaving like a trapped bird. "My work is to be invisible and precise." "Men looked," she hissed. "You stole the light in my room." She took the brush from me and swung it. Silver met cheekbone. The crack of it sounded like a cypress branch in a storm. I went down into a red so bright it felt clean. When the world returned, my breath ran like dogs, she kicked. "Silk shoes can injure. Cruelty lends them weight. I should send you to the sugar houses," she panted. Not because she planned it, because she wanted to taste the thought. When she finished, she smoothed her robe, replaced the brush on the table and sat. "Now," she said, as if we had resumed a lesson, "finish. One compliment at dinner. One fire lit in silence. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do? Pain organizes the world. It takes a room full of objects and arranges them by distance from your body. Brush, pins, ribbon, scissors." I stood with a mouthful of salt and iron and lifted my hands into the old choreography. Separate, smooth oil. The lamps hummed. The city outside played a slow drum of hooves on wet street. I watched her in the mirror watch herself. She had the serenity of the satisfied tyrant. Somewhere behind my ribs, a door opened. Not rage, clarity. I saw the map of my life as if someone had unrolled the parchment across her dressing table. The path to the quarters. The husband chosen for my compliance. The babies named for days of the week. The years of binding and bearing and burying until a day came when my hands forgot art. My grave would be a rumor. My name would soften into "that girl who used to." My fingers found the scissors. They were not heavy. They were possible. "Half an inch," she murmured, eyes closing in pleasure at her own reflection. "Only the splits." I tested the hinge. It made a small, hungry sound. I placed the blades where hair meets heat, that tender nape where secrets nap. I felt the pulse in her skin, slow, proud. "Careful," she said, not opening her eyes. I was careful, so careful the first cut sounded like silk deciding to become air. Coil fell. She smiled, still half asleep. "Yes, like that. You see how order returns when you obey?" Another cut, another small surrender from the idol. A third near the temple where vanity lives. Her eyes opened. Her hand flew up like a startled bird, found absence and trembled. "What?" I made the fourth cut loud on purpose. She saw the shape I was making and went pale the way milk goes thin in too much water. "No," she whispered. "Lily, no." "Yes," I said, my voice the calm in the storm I had refused for 19 years. "Tonight you will feel what I feel when you make something of mine smaller. One blow too many. One seed becomes a blade. If survival demanded action, would you take it?" I learned precision from loving the thing I meant to break. The trick is not clumsiness. It is design. I took from the left temple because symmetry comforts tyrants. I left raggedness where crowns begin so hats could not hide it. I feathered cuts near the ear so whispers would find cold skin and make her flinch. I shaped absence. She promised everything. "Freedom," she gasped. "Money, a pass to the north." "Lily, please, please," her hands fluttered like torn lace. Tears came quick as if sorrow were a pump she controlled with a ring. "Tonight," I said, "you will learn a new language." I cut words into the air, snip, 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 each sound a syllable. "Not yours anymore." Copper fell like autumn around a tree that had thought itself evergreen. "Stop," she sobbed. "I will change. I will treat you like silver you polish?" I asked, gentle as I had always been. "No, not again." I paused and set the scissors on the table. In their place, I lifted the little knife she used for wax seals. A delicate thing, meant for letters. It sat between my fingers as if it had always been there. She froze. The room knew a new weather. "Please," she whispered, a child's word in a woman's mouth. "Not my face." "The world must know you were touched," I said. "That your beauty could be altered by hands you paid to praise it." I placed the blade on the left cheek, where pride turns its head first. A thin line, no deeper than memory, no wider than a lie. She cried out. The mirror made two of her pain and gave one to me. When I stepped back, there was a mark that would not yield to powder. Now her hair lay about the chair like the petticoats of a fallen queen. The idol had a crack, and I felt no triumph. Only finally a room that matched the truth. One scar, one mirror. One truth no powder hides. If you could destroy what your oppressor prized most, would you? She begged the way the river begs the levee in storm season. Loud, then soft, then loud again. They'll hang you, she said, casting the future like a net. They'll tear you apart. Lily, think. She tried to turn me back into the version of myself that flinched at words. I have thought, I said. 19 years of it. In the mirror, I watched something unfamiliar settle on her face. Not grief, not rage, recognition. She saw a person where she had arranged a function. The realization hurt her worse than the cut. You planned this, she said, as if planning were sacrilege. Every night you made me hold a blade, I answered. Every night you taught me where your power lives. She reached for a bell rope to summon the house. I put my hand on her wrist and let her feel the gentleness that would not serve her anymore. She stopped. We both listened to the slow knock of our hearts. Two metronomes searching for separate songs. From outside came the sound of carriage wheels. Distant. Then near, the city returning my next scene. I gathered what belonged to me. My mother's folded letters in my apron pocket and my name in my mouth. I would need both. At the door, I looked back at the wreckage, hair like fallen flags, the mirror full of a stranger. Learn this, I said. Power can be quiet until it isn't. One idol toppled, one servant standing. Is beauty still beauty when it is built on cruelty? Master Philippe entered without knocking. Ownership forgets doors. His hat still smelled of dice halls and men who lie with their eyes open. He saw her first and his breath left the room. Evangel, he didn't finish her name. Names are for the intact. His gaze slid to me. The knife in my hand told the story faster than words. He looked at my cheek, at the red rivers crusting there, at the way I held myself like a sentence about to end. Why? He asked. Flat, a clerk's why, tallying damages. Because she beat me, I said, and turned my face so the mark mapped the math. Because she called my life an accessory. Because you built a house where mirrors get more mercy than people. He inhaled the way a man does when numbers don't add up, and the debt is his. You will hang, he said, not cruel, merely citing policy. Yes, I said, and watched the calculation behind his eyes wake like an old alligator. And the city will ask how your finest house lost its queen to a girl with house tools. Something in him flinched. Not compassion, consequence. Shame is just pride inviting itself to a different table. Evangeline tried to edit the story. It was madness, she sobbed. She snapped. Gee, it was a decision, I said. Madness would have cut your throat. I cut your story. Footsteps in the hall. Neighbors, constables, the world arriving to decide what it always decides. One confession. One mask of order slipping. Would you speak your truth even if it meant death? Constable Thibodeau's voice came in first. Loud, pretending bravery. Men like to sound bigger than the rooms they enter. Behind him, a junior with ink on his fingers the way boys wear hope. They stopped. Everyone stops at a scene that disagrees with their ideas. Takes a breath to rearrange belief. Who did this? Thibodeau asked, though the floor answered, hair like harvest, blood like punctuation. I did, I said. My hands. My reasons. The junior's eyes found the line on her cheek and widened until I saw the child he had been. He crossed himself fast, as if God were a door he needed to unlock in a hurry. They bound my wrists with rope too clean for its work. I did not resist. Resistance was done. Consequence begins with stillness. As they led me through the hall, I passed that long mirror in the corridor that always makes people straighten. I saw us, a woman with her wrists tied, a man with a badge, a husband with empty hands, and behind them a house that suddenly looked tired. I realized I had never seen myself in that mirror as anything but background. The rope insisted I step forward. On the porch, the night had teeth. Neighbors gaped, the way people do when a stage erupts on their street. Some clutching shawls to drag up pity. Others hiding smiles that smelled like gossip for breakfast. Someone whispered, Congo Square. Another. Example. I walked the way I always had, measured, shoulders low, eyes level, except now the movement belonged to me. One house of wealth undone in one night. Does rebellion begin with fire or with silence? They staged the trial like a matinee. Morning light, full benches, a jury that already knew the ending. The judge had a mustache that looked like 2 arguments. He peered at me the way men study handwriting they don't trust. The charges wore long names: assault, destruction of property, incitement, but boiled to this: you moved. Witnesses lined up to help the city believe itself. A neighbor who heard a scream, maid who saw hair on the rug, a doctor who called my cut decorative cruelty. Evangeline testified behind a veil because the scar offended her own eyes. Even her pain tried to be pretty. When it was my turn, I stood, not because I respected their theater, but because a voice carries straighter when the ribs are high. I don't deny, I said. I declare. Words learned new work in my mouth. I served this house 19 years and watched a woman polish herself with my life. I learned tenderness for a thing that hated me. I learned maps of flesh because that was my job. When she struck me for being seen, I struck her where her power lived. The room shifted. Bored men sat forward. Bored women stopped fanning. People like novelty, even when the cost is a person like me. The judge tapped wood with a gavel that had ended better stories. You speak well, he said, like praise was a bone. You listened, I said. That's rarer. The verdict came back with the speed of a yawn. The sentence tied a knot in the city's throat and called it order. Death by hanging, the judge said. And I felt the room exhale like a man who has said the line he practiced. I bowed my head, not for them, for my mother who taught me to braid and breathe. One trial. One truth spoken. One sentence passed. If death carried dignity, would you choose it? They brought me to Congo Square at noon when shadows hide short and drums carry. The law wanted a lesson. The city wanted a story. My people wanted a sign. All 3 got what they came for. I smelled cane liquor and Sunday soap, tobacco spit and beignets. Fear and courage mingled like 2 notes sharing a throat. On the edges, ladies with parasols treated my last minutes like an afternoon's remark. Closer in, faces I knew from markets and back doors stood stiffer than soldiers. The gallows looked unfinished, like a sentence missing verbs. The rope was new. I wondered whose hands twisted it. Did they hum? The preacher asked if I desired salvation. As if it were a shawl he could drape on me quick. I said a name instead, Rose, my mother. I thought of her fingers guiding mine through a braid so even angels would nod. They bound my ankles. I looked out and looked in at once, my heartbeat taking slow, deliberate steps, the drums answering in a tongue older than the law. Somewhere a baby cried and then didn't. A woman sang on one note until it grew branches. Last words? The man with the hood asked, bored the way clerks get when letters repeat. My name is Lily, I said, and the square said it back in a rustle. Lily, like leaves. I lived owned. I die chosen. Remember this, beauty built on suffering is a mask, and even scissors can cut masks. They tightened the noose. The sky held itself together. When the platform dropped, I thought only of breath, the first breath I took as a child. The breath I saved every time I made myself small. The breath after this one that would not come. Then a roaring silence, then nothing. Then a music I cannot explain. They took my body down. The crowd carried my name away, one square. One rope, one rebellion remembered. Will history call her criminal or witness? Stories travel faster than grief. By the week's end, hairdressers in the quarter whispered my name while they sharpened blades. In kitchens, women made the sign a finger makes when it remembers a line drawn on a cheek. In parlors, men lowered their voices when mirrors caught their eyes. Evangeline stayed inside. Veils learned her face the way hands learn prayer. She stopped hosting because laughter snagged on the scar. When she walked the garden, she chose the shade, and the flowers looked like they pitied her. The city did what cities do, forgot her beauty and remembered her story. Philippe sold the house in a season where prices felt like apologies. He left for Paris where men dress their guilt in art. But across an ocean, rumors are ships. Mine arrived before him. Among my people, a ritual grew not from church but from need. A pair of silver scissors, no one is certain if they were mine, passed from hand to hand. At each new house, the blade kissed the air behind a mistress's ear. Never the skin, just a near touch the way thunder warns a roof. It said, "We know where you keep your crown. Some cut their own braids as vow, not to love what hurts them. Some kept a strand in a book beside a pressed magnolia like a map back to courage. In Congo Square, girl children learned my name alongside drum patterns. Lily became a rhythm and a lesson. Gentle hands do not owe gentleness to cruelty. Years later, when the war that brewed like storm finally broke, the Union soldier wrote he heard women in New Orleans call out, "Cut it." When a flag came down, he thought they meant rope. They meant power. If you're still here, you care about buried history. Subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. Would you have lifted the scissors? Or would you have waited for a day that never comes? I end where I began, behind a chair in a room that smells of powder and plans, my hands hovering over a crown that never belonged to me. Gaslight trembles. The mirror holds us both and for once does not lie. Sometimes a small, honest cut lets truth breathe. New Orleans, 1853, one night. One cut through hair and through lies. Share your thoughts below and watch the next story. If freedom cost a mark, would you leave one?